You don't want to overcomb. You got to get it good. Where it's just fluffy enough, but not too fluffy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the wilderness on the internet. I am the Hunter Wild, an entertainer, broadcaster on twitch.tv/the Hunter Wild. This is another installation of deep casting where we talk about what it takes to take your stream to the next level or get it off the ground, get it started up, kick-started. And in this particular video, this particular episode, we're going to be covering a two-parter that kind of blends together the types of broadcasts that you can have and what types of games to play if you're going to have a game-oriented stream. So first things first, diving right in, what are the different types of casts that you can have, the different types of streams? Broadly speaking, generally speaking, you got the one type of game, the variety, community, challenge/competitive, talk, art, game design. Now, some of these can blend together, and certainly when it comes to what you do on your cast, all told, all together, you can do all of these things to an extent. But you're generally going to want to pick a couple of these, mix and match, put them together to have one somewhat unique broadcast and brand. But typically in terms of the broadcast itself that you present on Twitch. For the one type of game stream, you can have something that's focused, for instance, exclusively on first-person shooters. Maybe that's your type of game. Maybe that's really your jam. That's where you shine, and that's what you want to bring to Twitch. You want to show people what you excel at. That's going to be your selling point. Maybe it's all MMOs. Maybe you're one of those people who is just extremely addicted to MMOs, can't stop playing them. That would make a lot of sense to play if it's something that just invigorates you, makes you come alive. Beyond that, you've got the variety broadcast. That's where you're just playing a bunch of different types of games. That variety doesn't mean that you're playing every possible game and every type of game under the sun. Maybe variety means that you play an MMO for 2 months here, and you play an FPS for 3 days there, and you mix and match. You know, sometimes on weekends you're playing this other type of thing. That could be quasi variety, as well as just like the type of broadcast that I have, which is exclusively variety itself. We're just playing a bunch of different games all the time. Sometimes I'll play a game for 3 days. Maybe that's as long as it takes to complete it. Maybe I'm just done with it at that point. We'll play another game for 2 weeks, perhaps. And it's just constant cycle and flow through different games, keeping it spicy, keeping it spiced up. I was originally going to have a competitive single game focused stream, a Hearthstone only stream. That's another option that you have. But the problem with that was that I didn't really see it possible to have a competitive focused stream and have a community based stream at the same time. That's another option, community. Because with a competitive broadcast, you're really going to be focusing on the game a lot more. In order to be competitive, you tend to have to focus and not divide your attention between chat, having to keep up with people's lives and trading and sharing stories and feelings and what you guys did during the day. Instead, you're more focused on what it takes to be the best at the game in the moment. So these are kind of conflicting, though not inherently. One of my friends, Hotform, he is now officially one of the top Hearthstone players in the world. And his broadcast is highly competitive. Hearthstone also mixes it up with some variety from time to time, and he focuses on community and having a nice, even flow, even keeled, gentle kind of stream. Great, it's a great and very unique competitive, generally competitive, quasi or semi-variety community-based stream. Beyond that, on Twitch, you specifically have a gaming talk show section, you have the creative section, and you have the game design section. Now, I don't know. I assume that if you are a game designer and you're interested in broadcasting that, you can do your own research and find out how people go about broadcasting that, what kinds of things that you might need to pay attention to. It's not the kind of thing that I watch a lot of, and obviously I don't participate in it, so I can't give a fair amount of commentary on that one. I haven't broadcasted in the creative section yet, but before I started casting on Twitch, I was a professional artist. I was a painter for 5 to 6 years, and that is something I'm going to be bringing back to into my life, and that I'm going to be bringing onto my broadcast coming up in the next couple of months. So I'll definitely be able to add some more commentary about that in the near future. But I do watch a fair number of creative casts, and those are intensely enjoyable. I highly recommend checking out the creative section, especially if you are intent on broadcasting some of your artwork. And it doesn't even have to be art by itself. There is creative cooking. I've watched a fair number, and a fair number of my friends do baking, for instance. That's one of my favorite ones. Oh my god, cookies. Cookies! Baking broadcasts. One of my dear friends, That Mustachio, twitch.tv/thatmustachio, he does really interesting and outside the box creative content on Twitch in the creative department. He does stuff that's more in line with a carnival show. He has guest appearances from people who have like really unique and special talents, like a fire dancer and a fire breather and a fire swallower. This guy was amazing. It was amazing what they were doing, and that was all on the creative. That was all under the flag of creative on Twitch. You can get really funky and do some badass stuff under that creative section. It does not have to simply be drawing, although it can be. If you are going to go down the route of what somebody else, or if you are going to go down the route of what many other people are trying to do, which is a more standard creative component, try and spice it up with something else instead of merely putting out something that you're drawing. If what you wanted to do for today, if you have a plan to broadcast and you just really, really, really bad wanted to draw your cat, do it. By all means, absolutely go for it. Have your viewers sit there and watch it. But I would recommend trying to spice it up with something a little extra. For instance, every once in a while, you might want to do a rough sketch of viewer-voted stuff. Maybe you want to take a poll over the course of a week. Maybe you want to draw stuff related to a game that you are draw and or paint, or just do some side-by-side Bob Ross. I loved seeing people put up Bob Ross and then put up MS Paint and just go as he's talking about how he's adding the burnt umber to make the side of the barn, and we're just gonna scratch this in there, and then he's beating the devil out of his brush and whatever. People were doing the actual artwork side by side with him, and they were making some of the most horrifically ugly and hideous stuff most of the time, but it was just incredibly fun to watch. And you gotta remember, that's why people are coming to Twitch. The vast majority of people are coming to Twitch to be entertained. Of course, some people are coming to check out a game. Of course, some people are coming to try and increase their skills or gain some knowledge about a game or a certain tactic, perhaps. But by and large, even within those parameters, they still want an entertainment factor. Make the thing that you're doing, whatever it happens to be, make it entertaining, make it enjoyable. There is a lot that you can do under the gaming banner of Twitch. It's technically listed as gaming talk shows, though I'm not convinced that you have to have the purpose of the conversation, the core content of the conversation, be gaming itself. But I would recommend not diverging too much and talking only about, cupcakes and fairy dust and who knows what the fuck else you might talk about. Trying to have some gaming content in there at least some of the time to justify being listed under gaming talk shows. But you can talk about a wide variety of subjects, and it does not have to be exclusively about games. People are coming to Twitch, as I keep saying consistently, for entertainment. If you make it entertaining and you're drawing in the viewers, Twitch isn't going to be super picky. But you want to make sure that you're, it's a game. Come on, games, do the games, make it with the games. Got to put some gaming in there somewhere. So now, what games do you play? What games do you play if you're going to have a gaming-focused, a gaming-centric broadcast on Twitch, which is the vast majority of broadcasts and probably why most of you are here watching? Generally speaking, if you want growth, you can't just play any and every game that you want. This is it's not necessarily an obvious concept, but it becomes obvious over time. Once you understand a few things about the way Twitch works and some standard psychology. You have to play games that actually have current viewership, by and large. If you have 65 followers, for instance, and you go and play a game that absolutely nobody is watching. The only way that you're going to have people come into your broadcast is based on the only viewers who can find your broadcast, who are going to see that you are streaming anything at all, are the 65 people who are already following you. So then you've already limited that to 65 people. Out of all of the millions of people who watch Twitch, only 65 people can find your broadcast because they're already following you. Then it assumes that they're online, able to see your broadcast, and that they're not trying to watch something else, and that they actively want to watch whatever game that is, right? So you're each with each one of these chunks, you're narrowing it down and narrowing it down and narrowing it down to a smaller and smaller and smaller viewer base for that one day that you broadcast that one game. And assuming that presumably you're not going to broadcast for just one day, you're going to jump in and play the game, whatever game you're going to play for at least a few days if you're a variety broadcaster. You have extremely narrowed that scope. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you don't care inherently about growth. But if you're sitting here watching this, you're probably wanting to make something of a career out of broadcasting. That's the name of the game, baby! So if you're interested in playing a particular game, go and check on Twitch, maybe on your day off, and see how many people are playing during your normal broadcast time. If you don't have that opportunity, check before you would go live, maybe an hour before or something. Check after you get off stream while you're playing something else, and see if anybody's playing it. Hopefully, there are more than a few broadcasts playing it, but not too many. Not too many. That goes hand in hand with another subject that we're going to get to in just a minute. The point here is that it's essentially impossible to have growth if people cannot find your broadcast. If people cannot jump into your stream to see that you are entertaining and click on that follow button, you'll never have return viewers if you can't get the viewers in the first place. You'll never get the viewers in the first place if you're playing a game that nobody watches. Unless you somehow have a lot of pull from somewhere else on the internet. Or maybe in real life. If, for instance, you have 4,000 Twitter followers and no followers on Twitch, but you're just starting up the broadcast, that's a pretty big potential audience. You might be able to draw people in if you have an interesting tweet, maybe with an image in it, to gain more attention, gain more traction. That might be able to draw some people in from somewhere. There are places other than Twitch from which you can draw viewership. It's far less likely unless you already are entrenched in those places, such as like I said, you have several thousand followers on Twitter, for instance. That would be an easy place to go to if you're already entrenched in YouTube and you have a few thousand subscribers. You could talk about something there, try and draw some people into Twitch. But by and large, if you don't have somewhere to draw upon for that viewership, you're definitely not going to be gaining it on Twitch if there aren't viewers there already. It is typically recommended, and I totally understand why people say this, and I say the same thing. Vast majority of broadcasters will tell you one of the biggest factors in being successful on Twitch is enjoying what you're doing. If you're not having fun broadcasting, you're not going to be presenting a good show. You're not going to be entertaining for other people, and you aren't going to want to come back and continue broadcasting. You're not going to. At the same time, your fun factor shouldn't really be the only focus if you're trying to do this professionally. If you're trying to do it as a hobby, do whatever you got to do, baby. You do you. If you're trying to do this professionally and bring this into the point where it could potentially be a career in the longer term or the shorter term, fun on your side has to be there, but it shouldn't, in my opinion, be the focus. If you're just there to have fun for yourself, that justifies playing any game whatsoever, and that, given the things that I was just talking about, makes it really difficult for some people to find you and for growth to happen. You want to be playing games that are very fun for you for sure, so that you can be entertaining, you feel invigorated, you're bringing that energy and that joy to the viewers to chat at the same time as it has viewership. Given the contemporary gaming climate, given the industry and how many games there are out there to play that are being released regularly, especially in the realm of indie games, you should have no problem whatsoever finding a game that has some viewership and is intensely enjoyable for you. No problem. This should be easy. Now, it might not be easy every single day of the week. You know, sometimes you might find a game that you've never played before, you have no idea how it is, you jump into it, turns out that's not so enjoyable. So you play it that one broadcast, and you don't play it the next. Sure. You're gonna have some instances where you might not necessarily be having a good time. Try and do what you can to make it a good time for yourself, and that way you'll get good response from potential viewers and such. More with what games to play, here is another big factor. Almost guaranteed lower viewer count if you play AAA titles as they release. Almost guaranteed every time. Lower viewer count if you play a AAA title on release. Let's say Assassin's Creed comes out with a new game, as though they're not going to every 3 days or whatever. Assassin's Creed comes out with a new game. You want to play it so bad. Normally, as a gamer, you pick it up on day one. I mean, maybe you don't, but I do. You pick it up on day one. You play it on day one. You're fine. You're good to go. That's not a challenge to anything. You're a gamer. You just sit down and play the games that you want. As a broadcaster, other factors come into play. Notably, the other people who are playing the game, like what we were talking about before with the lack of viewership. You also have a problem with the opposite situation, an oversaturation of viewership. When a game is brand new, there's going to be a lot of viewership on Twitch. However, while that seems like that might be a great time for you to jump in and get on that game, because a lot of people are going to be watching that game, they're not going to be watching you play it. The big broadcasters on Twitch are like magnets. When people want to go in and watch the new Assassin's Creed, they click on that title in the games listing and see who's broadcasting it. And the first 30 people on there have like thousands more, at least hundreds of viewers, right? At least hundreds of viewers watching their broadcasts. So people who are interested in watching that game get played on Twitch are going to look at the first few people, and maybe they're like, I'd rather be noticed in a chat than just get swallowed up by the 10,000 people who are watching Co, or the 40,000 people that are watching Lyric and so on. So I'm going to go down to find some other people. They scroll down for a few lines of broadcasters, and then they find somebody who's playing with like 250 people. They're not going to find you like 50 pages down when you have 0 viewers, you know what I mean? Nobody's going to go scroll down and find you that one day. It's going to be a complete fluke if somebody happens to find you amidst all that madness. My recommendation, and pretty much everybody's recommendation, when it comes to AAA titles, wait at least a couple of weeks until after the hype has died down a bit, and at least until after the biggest casters have stopped playing it. That's when people like I start playing it, and I might be toward the top of the list. There'll be people who have a few hundred viewers, maybe a random person here or there who's got like a 2,000 viewership or something, just soaking up that number one spot per chance. But at least a couple weeks in, you start having a shot of finding viewers. If you wait a few months and there's still viewership on that game, and there's likely to still be some viewership, if you wait a few months, if you're really usually sitting down at the bottom with like 0 to 3 viewers, that's when you might want to play that game, because that's when you get the potential to have maybe 5 more people come into your stream. And who knows? Every once in a while, you hit the right sweet spot with those, and you end up getting like 30 people in there, 30 brand new people all at once, like all on one day. Sometimes that can be a decent break for some broadcasters, waiting a few months until after The Witcher 3 has been released. And there's still a fair amount of viewership, still a lot of people who are playing the game or maybe getting it for the first time, didn't want spoilers, but now they're a fair bit in, they want to watch other people playing it. You got a chance there. You got a real chance there. Starting out of 0 viewership and playing variety can be fairly difficult by comparison to the single core game kind of stream. Now, it's really easy to get burned out on the single core game kind of stream, but if it's something that you really love, you can stick with it for a good while and gather a really nice and significant viewer base, especially if you have a community focus. Then you will have a connection. You will feel a connection to those people, and those people will feel a connection to you that is likely to carry over regardless of the game that you play, so that when you branch out, you do get to keep at least a decent chunk of that viewership. When it comes to starting out as variety, that can be very difficult. It used to be my main recommendation was you don't want to start out with a core stream because then when you switch over to something else, you lose a lot of that viewership. Things have changed around in my thinking, at least, if not how Twitch actually works, over the last year that I have been broadcasting for 2,500 hours or so. If you are going to be playing variety, which is how I started and how I will always be streaming in all likelihood, if you are going to be going down the variety route and you want growth, the single best, if I were to give one recommendation, that recommendation for type of game would be semi-hyped indie titles. Independent games tend to get, when they have at least some hype to them, some consistent viewership, and or some big impulsive viewership toward the beginning. Those types of games tend to attract way fewer top tier casters who are going to be the core magnets that draw viewership away from everybody else. Fewer of those, and more likely to have viewers who will look further on down the list of streamers who are playing that game to find other people playing. People who have 0 viewers, 1 viewer. You'll find those people who will trickle down into the smaller streams far more likely. On Twitch, there is a fair amount of viewership that almost exclusively watches independent titles. If you go into some of the key independent title games and broadcast those, you will pick up some of those viewers and then find it possible to carry them on over into other independent titles. And over time, you will gather more and more people and then be able to play a AAA title well after release, for instance, and continue on with the variety stream. Additionally, you've also got the single core game, the one game that you focus on. This couples very well with the challenge competitive type of broadcast, where you have just one thing that you focus on and you try and be the best at that thing. Maybe not even the best, but you try and challenge yourself to do better at it. Maybe do some speed runs, maybe do some particular challenge runs. A great example of this is Dark Souls. Careers can be built off of Dark Souls only streams. Now, you don't necessarily want to go Dark Souls only for your entire Twitch career. That's not going to end up very well in the long run. But, as a starting place, focusing on just one game that has a core viewership is a great idea. I used to be averse to this idea because switching out of a single core game or a single type of game and then going variety, which is what the vast majority of people who play those types of things do, eventually you switch out from that one game, and either you might switch out from, League of Legends and go to another MOBA, but you still have to switch out, and you're guaranteed to lose at least some of your viewership, if not a significant portion, when you switch out. However, if when you get this focused game rolling, you end up getting such a big and core community, especially if you're a community focused streamer with that core game, a big chunk of those people are more likely to follow you into another genre, into another game, or into another type of broadcast, from a focus stream to a variety stream. Many of my friends have done this exact thing. Retro Gaijin, one of my dearest and closest friends on Twitch, had a Super Smash Bros. Only stream for a significant portion of the beginning of his career, but his name is Retro Gaijin. He wanted to have something other than that, and he was playing it pretty competitively. He was playing it really aggressively. What he ended up doing was starting a Retro Monday, where he would take one day of the week and play something other than his focused game, something other than Super Smash Brothers. And so he would, he'd play an old Zelda, he'd play an old Mario on just Monday, to see how many people that carried over from that core, like a few hundred people coming in watching his Smash broadcasts, how many of those people would carry over and watch something that had nothing to do with the main game that he played most of the time. And it turned out he had a pretty decent number of people coming over, like maybe a third, which for somebody who does a focus game, those are pretty good numbers. Those are pretty good numbers. You have a third of the people carry over. The more often you do that, if you keep that consistent, just one day a week, the rest of the days, like the other 5 days a week, 4 days a week that you broadcast, it's that other focus game. Then you keep those people coming back. Some of them, as you continue to do that one day a week kind of thing, will more of them will kind of congeal around it and be like, you know what, I think I'm gonna mess around with it today. I normally don't watch when he's not playing Smash, but today I'll see what happens. Same thing with a friend of mine, the Happy Hobbit. He started broadcasting with Dark Souls, and he did Dark Souls only almost this whole time. But he started dabbling in some other stuff because a future, a career in broadcasting has to involve something other than that core game. If it's not truly competitive, like professional at the game, if you're not able to go in and do competitions at that game, you have to be able to branch out at some point sooner rather than later. So there are two key elements to the single core game broadcast. One, you can go hard and you can build a really strong viewer base with a single core game. That is the reason why you would want to focus on just one game. Two, eventually you're going to have to move on from whatever this core game is at some point. To do so, start maybe doing some aftercast or some at the end of the cast game switching, where you try and move on to something else, or like I was talking about Retro Gaijin, do a particular day of the week where you try and do something else. Maybe every once in a while you'll play another game that you know you won't have to play for very long. Maybe 3 days. Maybe you know that it's somewhat short, and you'll basically be taking a quick break from the core game that you play. See how many people come over with you. The more often that, the more consistently that you do this, the more likely you are to see more people stick around. The first time that you do it, chances are you're going to see a massive drop. The second time, a pretty big drop. The third time, a pretty decent drop. You know what I mean? More and more, as you make one day a week the specialty broadcast, or like the divergent broadcast where you're playing a different type of game than the one that you normally play, you'll start seeing more people pick up. More people come in and watching that, and then you can start adding another day in there. Or with the end of the broadcast thing, instead of just playing Mario Maker at the end of the broadcast to try and switch it up from Dark Souls or whatever, maybe then you'll eventually have one day where you do all Mario Maker or all some other type of game. Something that will spice it up. So initially what you want to do is just put a little sprinkling on. See how the reception is. And you should expect there to be not good reception at first. Keep with it though. Make sure that you're not doing it so often that that initially that big drop just stays that low, because it will. You don't want to clear cut. You don't want to go from having an all Dark Souls stream for like the first 7 months that you're streaming and then switch and just do completely different shit all of a sudden. The likelihood is that you're going to lose a lot of that viewership, and it won't rebound because you're not bringing those core people back in. Bob and weave! If you got anything out of this today, feel free to go down and tap on that like button. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys down in the comments as well. And if you want to catch any of the future broadcasts, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. You'll get all the highlight reels, all the deep casting videos, all the YouTube exclusives, everything, all the content that I have to offer. Feel free to check out some of the other videos that we have in the series too. I am the Hunter Wild. I would love to see you over on twitch.tv/thehunterwild, where I jam out 7 days a week right now, starting at 7 p.m. EST. Go follow me on Twitter at TheHunterWildTV, and I cannot wait to see you back up in the wilderness and the internet next time!